Welcome to the I Need Coffee and Better Ideas podcast, where we caffeinate your brain with the freshest takes in news media.
You might be in for a ride today. Today I've got with me Alexian Chiavegato from Marfield. Welcome to the show, mate.
Hey, Bigger. Thank you so much for the invite.
So we've known each other for some years, and I have to say, every time I see your name on the attendee list, I know it's going to be a great event. We've had some fun together. We've also had some pretty solid conversations together before. So that's why we figured, let's not wait. Let's get Alex on the podcast and see what he has to say.
Yay. No,
Yeah.
it's definitely I'm sharing the exact same thing as you. I know the event is going to be great. And I have to say, after so many years working together, we actually find a dynamic that works very, very well. So I'm very glad you invited me today.
Let's see where we end up today. But we'll stick to the sort of usual rhythm of this. I know you don't have a title at Marfield, and we've talked about that. But please feel free to enlighten us. Sort of what's been your ride so far in this world, and how'd you end up where you are today?
Well, this is a really, really good question. So I'm going to pass, all of the boring part of it, where I went to study and everything like that. But I was always living abroad. So I was born in France, but then from my 20s, I started to go abroad to study and then to start working. Pretty quickly, I started to work in education, technology education, where I was lucky enough to join in London the Macmillan Publishing Group, where I was supposed to launch an education services. And I really liked the publishing part of it. It was really, really interesting. Fast forward a few years after doing some works in Europe and in North America, I decided it was time for me to get out of a bad weather type of location and move to a nicer one. And I found the current company I'm working at the moment, Marfield, as I Googled the best 10 startup in Barcelona. And I reached out to the HR director and say, look, I don't care what job you have. I just want to move to Spain. Basically, funny enough, out of 10, 8 of them answered me and said, let's talk, which I found very interesting, given my background in marketing and running marketing, SaaS marketing or B2B marketing. I was thinking it would be a bit difficult, but not at all. And I chose Marfield because it was the product that was I would say the earliest in inception. And also it was absolutely no marketing team. And my mandate was to build a marketing team that was connected to the sales.
What year was this, you said?
This is 8 years ago.
8 years ago. Okay.
8 years ago. Yeah. So, and quickly I basically merged marketing and sales together. And now I'm running this part of the business. Okay. How do we generate basically? How do we get new clients? And how we understand the market? So I'm always sitting in between two chairs. One is the product side, trying to resurface when I go to meetings, to events, to understand what people actually are caring about, what is their biggest challenge, why they don't sleep at night. That's part of my job. And the second part of my job is to lead the business team, right? How do we get new clients? And the two things work in symbiosis and normally works very, very well in the organization.
Interesting. So part CPOs, part CMO, part sales. Now, if we sort of shift the gear a little bit away from you and over to the industry, in the 8 years you've been at Marfield, what has surprised you the most about this industry? Because, we go to a lot of conferences, the world is changing. However, it seems sometimes that the world is changing faster than our industry. At least that's my observation. It feels like we're always a bit behind, but there are people out there who are trying to push the envelope and see what can be done. But from your perspective, sort of what's been the most learning experience, if you let's call it that, learning experience, since you started up at Marfield about 8 years ago?
So definitely things accelerated in the last 4 years with our current product offering. But to answer you here, the thing I found the most amazing about a publisher is the fact that everyone thinks a publisher is the guy writing the news, right? But when you work in this industry, you quickly realize, no, a publisher is someone that needs to write. So the newsroom is really important, but the entire ecosystem that lives around the newsroom is equally important. And by that, I mean the social media team, for instance, right? They're not writing the news, but how can they reach an audience in social media? The SEO team is always the one that we always think as the most obvious one, or the audience team. But then you can see also the product team, the newsletter, right? Creating a newsletter is another world. Yet you will see subscription that comes in, and e-commerce, right? Writing content or promoting content to the audience in order to generate more revenue. This is very fascinating. So yet we think publishers are maybe slow movers, but it is like an octopus, right? They have so many branches. It's a beautiful tree that it's very complicated. The larger the publisher is, and the most slow mover he can be because of that. But they're the first one also to take on some technologies. We know everyone is talking about AI, but publishers really embraced it in a very early stage or wanted to embrace it at early stage. And this is what we normally, you and I hear about, when we go to those conferences that speaks 2-3 days just about AI for publishers and their willingness. And looking at the way how they use it is also very interesting because no two publishers use technology the same way. Now, on the challenge side, I think it's still an industry that has a foot on printing. And due to the fact of printing, this is an old world. It's a bit complicated for them to be on printing and on digital. This stage or this transition is not clear everywhere around the world for every publishers around the world. And this is a challenge by itself.
Yeah, and that last point I think is to me very interesting. I've been lucky enough to meet quite a lot of CEOs of everything from small to mid to big size publishers. And whenever I have the chance to do it, I always ask them if they still have, a good proportion of print dependency, especially from the revenue side of things, right? You feel like you have to keep it alive. But I asked probably 20 of them, what would happen if you just put down your print business today? Yeah, you would have to fire a lot of people, but pretend for a moment that you're a startup. Would you start up today with a print magazine or print newspaper? Or would you just start digitally and start growing from there? And of course, this is a difficult question. There is no right or wrong answer. This is going to be difficult for every CEO out there. But at some point, print is going to be too expensive. The paper is going to be too expensive because for every newspaper that puts down print, it gets a little bit more expensive for the rest of them. And it's just going to be a race to the bottom, I guess. Now, if we sort of keep that in mind, yes, you have to keep print alive, if you're still reliant on it from a revenue point of view. But the content that you produce, I see still a lot of people or a lot of companies produce content that has a dual purpose, or even so that they produce two types of content, one for print, one for digital. It seems awfully resource constraining. From your experience, what should sort of those steps be if you're sitting there and you're trying to produce the most engaging content for your digital audience, but you still have to put stuff on print tomorrow or on the page tomorrow? What do you do? You have analytics that can help you analyze what you get readers on from a digital point of view. So lean into that, or what do you do?
Well, I think it's a very interesting question. It really depends on how the newspaper is set up, right? Or the magazine. So if a newspaper is more because they might have daily, printing, but the editorial gut in printing is still important, right? Whereas the online one can be more reliable on data. And this in an approach is really different. If the newspaper is digital led, in this case, it's pretty straightforward, right? Write stories my reader wants to read today, right now, today. And what did they like yesterday? And this is the base of knowing what is going to be on the printing version, right? But now there is areas of the printing that is not necessarily articles, but are extremely relevant. Quizzes, little games. I don't know how you call that in English, but where you read where people are dead, when people are born. This is very important. And if you are printing newspaper, they will tell you, yeah, people really, really read that. Well, it's not something that necessarily is checked online, right? So the audience is really different. And because the audience of reading and the patterns of reading can be very different, they need to be approached at two different products. You can use the digital data to help with the production of a printed newspaper, but there is still a lot of art and craft that needs to be brought in the printing, which can make it also more expensive to operate.
When you meet customers, what do they ask you about?
What do they ask me about? They certainly don't ask me where this lovely accent comes from. I'll make sure I
That
say
lovely, Alex. It's not that lovely. Only you think that.
yeah, I guess I don't hear me. So thank God on that. What do they ask me first? Well, and this is really depending on where they are on the journey of understanding the audience through the content, through proper data, right? Robust, simple data. And in this case, it will be different. But the first thing is always like, beside how much it costs, which is we can talk about the price sensitivity of the market currently later. But it's more like, why do I need this? I know I need more insight, but then what do I do with that? How do you help me with my team to adopt this culture of data more? And this people aspect of it is really important. And they always comes after to tell me and say, but tomorrow, will you be here? What will you do tomorrow? What is the innovation for you? We've been promised A, B, and C in the past, and we never have that. So those things are very important to publishers today. When you first meet, is like, okay, why my team will benefit from you guys, and we'll show it to them simply.
A topic that seems to be rising for us, at least, or at least actually there are two topics that we notice immensely at Norkon. One of them is engagement, and the other one is SEO. We get asked those questions all the time, and we have those conversations all the time with both potentially new customers and existing customers. Just last night, I had one of those conversations about engagement metrics. I'm not an expert in engagement metrics, but I do know that certain things drive engagement more than others. In your experience, do you feel that publishers are well enough educated? And the second part to that question is, what are the metrics that actually matter?
Wow. I mean, bigger. This is really
Go ahead.
okay, because no two publishers are alike, but they are kind of similar, right? You have a similarity. So how do you drive engagement? Well, there is tons of process that can be done. First of all, is to understand your content and understanding your audience. And engagement is a result of the two things, really. Based on that, you could look at how an article is being built. Okay. So in other words, is what part of my article engages with my audience. And in this case, you will look at KPIs such as scroll rate, engagement, so time on page, time on articles, time on site, this could be that. But then also engagement is the power of pushing the right content to the right person in order to keep them engaged, right? And what is the right content? What's the next piece to read or to interact with? And this user, so we call, user journey and his reader experience. So this reader experience, you will look at the page per session and so on and so forth. So you will then look at the user rather than the content to see if there is a proper recirculation or interactions, right? It's not a bad thing to understand. And we always say that through our recommender engine is an audience, a brand new user, you are not going to point that person straight away to a newsletter, right? Because it's just the first time on your website. However, a user that is mega in love with you and your content, that's the moment when you need to ask for a little bit more. In between is to put the right recommendation engine, the right recommendation articles to that person at the right moment. And by orchestrating this, normally engagement grows a little bit more. And the final thing is actually on the off-page engagement. You have so many mechanisms in order to get back this audience. Then you need to be playing a fine game to balance things, social media, push notification, email marketing or emails, newsletters, and so on. And when we go to the event, we hear a lot of, I would say, large publishers really spending the money and the time to try to create micro segments. And I'm taking the example of the newsletter on specific topics to keep them engaged. So engagement can come from different angles. So out page or off page. And when they're in pages, they are the time in articles or in the activity they're doing. Watching a video is also a matrix of engagement. And then is the recirculation, which is another step of the engagement.
And if we look at the focus in the industry going forward, you already touched on AI, and we've just talked about engagement. That's a big one. I can't seem to get away from SEO, as I mentioned. That's just like, we just did a webinar. We had more than 200 people sign up for the webinar, which is huge for a company like Norkon. And the questions we get regularly from customers in certain regions more than others, I would say US, UK, Germany, Canada, are probably the regions we get the most questions from when it comes to SEO and breaking news. From your perspective, what's sort of the trend that you're seeing with regards to SEO in the markets that you're working? Is this something that you and the team at Marfield are focusing on, or are you leaving that up to someone else?
No. This is one of our key things, SEO, actually, broader SEO. So we will be looking at it in two different angles. What is important is the technical SEO. I will start with this part, right? First, having I will say, fairly large account in one of the regions you mentioned, that is asking me, what am I supposed to do with my AMP pages? Is it going to impact my my Google traffic, my Google Discover traffic? No. And this is the way we work with our clients. We're always trying to understand what they're trying to do in that case. So you should be looking at your technical SEO and see if you are already optimized on your non-AMP pages, just to make sure you keep the wave going. But the technicality goes a bit deeper. Hey, I don't understand why my page are not in ranking. Well, because maybe the date of publication is not matching with the date of update. There is some little thing that makes a big impact on Google. That's one thing. And after that, there is all about the anatomy of the articles themselves. Okay. And this is where we are really, really strong at. So to basically give the insight of what something will have more chance on ranking on Google Discover or Google. But there is also all of the workflow about, we always think about the news now. I need to be now. Yes, great. But there is also all of the evergreen content.
Yep.
Which is still very relevant part, right? And in there is specific flows for editors to go ahead and say to their team, okay, on this set of articles, here are the actions you need to do. So there is, again, three categories: the technicality, and then when you're looking at the anatomy of an articles for real time catching up right now, we see it a lot with our Google Discover monitoring tool we do have to see who is winning, who is losing, kind of things, understand a bit about the articles itself. And then there is the evergreen strategy. So the three things, when they're done properly, normally the result on Google increases a lot.
One other area that I can't come to terms with this by myself, and trust me, I've spent hours thinking about this, a lot of hours. On one hand, I feel like digital subscriptions is a potential, I wouldn't call it necessarily a savior, but it's a potential strong revenue stream for publishers. However, on the other side of things, I just don't see it working out in the long term, because, and my rationale for that is basically there's just not enough people out there who are willing to pay for news. What are your views on digital subscriptions? Do you think that this is a viable business model for most publishers? And let me just add something to that. There are publishers out there who are clearly going to knock it out of the park, right? Yeah. We just saw Le Monde come out and say that 70% of their revenues now are from digital subscriptions, and they will have a fully funded newsroom based on digital subscriptions. We clearly know that the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Financial Times, other big brands are going to do quite well, and they've already been doing quite well for some time. Mm-hmm. But what about the rest of them? That's where I struggle. I just don't see it. I don't see it for the, vast amount of, let's call it second tier publishers out there who are not the biggest brands. They don't have access to the biggest, the best talent. They might not be able to afford hiring people that they should be hiring. They might not be able to buy the technology that they would like to buy. And they just don't have the market position. And that's my cynical view, that I think it's going to be challenging. And publishers like that need to look elsewhere for revenue, and they need to do it now. your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a multi-billion-dollar question, really, right? And I agree with you on the name you shared. They do nail it, right? We can take the Guardian and say, well, he's not doing paid subscription yet; he's mastering his own ways, right? So I think this is the reference outlet, so newspaper out there will always have a crowd that are willing to pay for. And it's true that the second tier, to use your word, they might be a little bit more in a struggle. And the diversification is very, very important. One thing that we are seeing is there is a lot around commerce content or affiliation as a potential revenue stream, okay? And it's becoming more and more important. But now it's all about creating the right product for the right audience. So I don't think subscription will die. Like, I don't think printing will die. I think it will be always there because people like on a Sunday to go and to buy a newspaper when they go to buy the baguette, right? So in this is very important.
Of course.
Of course. If it's not a baguette, there is no newspaper attached to it. But this is very, very important. So today we know that affiliation in general is very, very important to publishers. What is going to be tomorrow? I frankly don't know. And with the AI, on Google and so on and so forth, I'm just wondering how can they monetize all of this content they are producing better, right? You remember when it was a rise of videos and everyone was going after videos and high CPMs and so on. I mean, it was really interesting, but I think it didn't go up to our expectations. The only thing is diversification and understanding that certain audience monetize better than others. And you might have to sacrifice some of your audience for the sake of generating more revenue, right? But this is going to be a very difficult balancing act between sacrificing maybe a bit of audience to generate more revenue.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex world out there, and we're sitting right in the middle of it, Alex. And we're fortunate enough to meet up with some of the best minds in this industry and talk to them directly, you being one of them. So that's the only compliment you'll ever get from me. Just kidding.
It's recorded so I can play
It is. it's I can't walk away from it now. No, it's nobody. I think you're right. I mean, I'm being perhaps more cynical and more negative than I perhaps need to be. But you just mentioned one of the reasons also, right? The traffic levels are going to be impacted by AI in some way that we just don't know yet. And I saw yesterday Schibsted came out and said that they struck a deal with OpenAI, and all of their content in Swedish and Norwegian will be fed into OpenAI. I just hope that, Axel Springer and the others who were the first to strike deals with OpenAI and the rest that are following now are doing well in negotiating. That's all I'm hoping. I don't know the insides of those deals, but they better be good for this to be worth it. I hope it's not a desperate move. Because if we're going to look at history, Facebook said that they were going to be a friend to the news industry. Oh, they weren't. Google said they were going to be a friend to the news industry. Shocker, they weren't. And now OpenAI is saying we're going to be a friend to the news industry. Jury's still out, but if history is going to tell us anything in the future too, maybe for that one.
You have a big difference here. The big difference is before it was a war of attention, meaning that when you had a user coming online, you need to fight for the attention of the user with your peers, right? So that was logical. I was positioning a story with my article, and you were positioning on the same story with your article, and we had to fight that. And this is let's call it a fair battle, right? Mm-hmm. Now you have this new dimension. So publishers need to fight a new way. And I just hope this is good, right? Because we don't have precedent. We don't know if this is right or wrong.
No, absolutely not.
It is happening.
Yeah.
But also, if we look at the hundreds of years publishers existed, they always reinvent themselves and they always find a way to make it work, right?
Yep. Yep.
So I just hope this time they're just going to be this right transition period where they will still be able to employ people, to have families, and to have everyone can make a life of that money. Because if it's only benefiting a few group, it's going to be very sad for the news industry.
Yeah, having looked at how some, and this is, the result season is coming up now, right? We're about to find out how many of the publishers did last year. And some of the news that are coming out now, I'm not going to mention names because I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say it out loud. But I know Alma Media, they went out public and said they had a great year last year. Le Monde clearly must have had a great year last year. I looked at a customer of ours that I can't mention, but their numbers were way up last year. So to your point, the media industry is finding ways to reinvent themselves. They are finding ways to make money happen. And I just hope that they will be able to keep doing that as the world is moving in a super rapid speed going forward. And even having the experience that we have, and with people who are more experienced than we are, it's hard to know where this is going in the next couple of years with AI and changes happening in search and people's media habits changing rapidly. I'm curious where all this is going.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's going to be interesting, but this is why you and I are going to events, no? To listen to those great minds and to share and to share and to share. To go to those roundtables and to hear my worry is that, my worry is that, I think we are in a part of an ecosystem that has a big advantage is we can create what they need tomorrow, as long as we just listen to what they need, right? It doesn't mean we need to go left and right and do all of those things randomly, right? But the big trends and everything like that. Today is really important. We are really, really listening to the market vibe, to the market needs, and to try to adapt as fast as possible. And, we are in a free market in a way, so the best will win. And this will come out just a better product for the reader in general, a better thing, a better way of consuming the news. And you're saying it very well, a 15-year-old or 18-year-old doesn't consume the news as we do, but we still need the content. We still address it with an audience. We still have a technology to power it. So there is still common point that will always be there, but it's the way we use it. And I think this is the hardest part, is to know what do we do next. But what do we do next is because we are listening. Otherwise, there is no way we will know what publishers need, audience need, reader needs.
And on that note, as we round off, Alex, how many cups of coffee do you have per day?
So, a funny story. A few weeks ago, I got a flu that ended up by being a COVID. And since then, I don't like coffee anymore. Coffee is completely gone from my system. So I would have never imagined in my life to stop to drink coffee. But so I don't drink coffee anymore. Before that, I will drink, I don't know, 4 or 5 coffee a day.
Oh, I wish you all the best in getting the taste for coffee back.
Right. So what am I gonna replace it with? Nothing. Just to get back to coffee.
Yeah, I think so. What's that Argentinian drink?
I
forget the name of it.
Me too.
Anyways, Alex, great to have you on. Thanks for a wonderful conversation, as always. And then I'm looking forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you for the invite, Bigger. And next podcast is on me.
Perfect. Merci beaucoup. All right. See you, man.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.